Welcome in. Hail to the podcast brought to you by Maize and Blue Review. We cover Michigan for the Rivals Network, which means you can find us at michigan.rivals.com. I can't believe I got through that. Whew. Wait, that says an error occurred. We are definitely back. There we go. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I was getting an error on my end. All right. Thank you guys for dealing with us. We've obviously been gone quite a bit the last few weeks. Holiday stuff, illness stuff, you name it, but we are all three here for the first time. So it was very good to say I'm joined as always by Intel insider and publisher, Mr. Maize and Blue Review himself, Josh Henschke. Hi.
Hi. How's it going?
Good. How are you, buddy?
I'm good. Doing well.
And of course, our man of different backgrounds. I think I recognize this one.
Yep.
But we're sorry not to split him up too much. But Brock Heilig, what's up, buddy?
Nothing much. Doing well. Glad to have Josh back. Always good to have three of us on here talking, conversing about Michigan. So it's good for all of us. I think this is the first time in 2025, so it's exciting.
I think it's since Christmas. It's been a while. So again, we appreciate you guys. There was different. I don't even remember all the different reasons we've had to miss. So we're gonna try and be more consistent, and we are glad to be back, Joe. Thank you. All right, so yeah, because I don't even think all of us were here to talk about the bowl game. Right? Yeah, no. So we didn't even talk about trying to think about how much we've missed since we've been on. But yeah, Brock, you and I did a little spot show in the middle. I don't even remember what we talked about, to be honest with you. So
at this basketball, if I remember right.
Yeah, I think so. Which we're gonna push basketball off for now. It's crazy to think. I mean, football is a year-round sport, right? But the transfer portal, the dust has largely settled there. I think we have a good idea. I mean, we know who hasn't entered at this point. The deadline's passed. Additions-wise, we have a good idea. I think Michigan's really kind of settled in here heading to spring. Recruiting, there are still a couple pieces of recruiting, massive pieces of recruiting to talk about. 26 and 27 kids were on campus as well, but I think we're going to just talk about those last couple pieces in the 25 class. And then coaching. Wink Martindale, a couple interviews for defensive coordinator at the NFL level. Both of those jobs have been filled. I don't think that means we're necessarily done with Wink Watch yet, but we can kind of talk about the coaching staff and then just big picture everything, where this team is sitting heading into spring practices, which are unbelievably only a few weeks away at this point. So, Josh, let's start with the portal. I think a lot of Michigan fans, the general sentiment is they're not happy or not pleased with this transfer portal. I think a lot of that could be we talked about thinking Michigan was going to make a lot of moves in this portal. We expected a lot of big additions to come. I think, though, that was based on the fact that we also expected a lot of people to leave. And maybe we weren't coming out saying that prevalently because it's just kind of a weird thing to talk about. There was a exodus expected here, and not necessarily a big negative thing, just guys, change of scenery kind of thing that happens after a tough season, right? And the bye week of the Northwestern game, the Ohio State win, the win over Alabama, the tides have really turned here. And Michigan and Sean McGee and everybody involved with retention has done an incredible job of keeping a lot of these guys home. So we talked about, man, Michigan's going to go in the transfer portal and they're going to have starting position opportunities available. And that ended up not really being the case because they kept so many people back. So for you, this transfer portal, as you look at, and again, we can nail down individual guys and things as we go along, but when you look at this as a success or a failure, not a lot of big splashes for Michigan, but if you look at some of these other programs, Alabama, Georgia, the big names we talk about Michigan competing with, Michigan seemed to do the best job of keeping guys home. So do you view this as a success, or do you think Michigan could have done more from an addition standpoint?
I still think it's a success personally. I think Michigan added depth and key pieces in key places, and I think that's what they needed. Obviously linebacker when they're still figuring out if they want to move Barham to edge full time. Now you've got Troy Bowles' kid or Troy Bowles coming in, and So look, there's pieces. It's so hard to really evaluate what Michigan's doing in the portal right now when these guys haven't played it down at Michigan, so it's like a lot of people were kind of poo-pooing the idea of Amir Hall and going, why would you want to do FCS? Why are you adding, the such and such guys here? And, you see them make some contributions, and obviously not everyone, not every addition they made last year out of the portal was a hit, but the percentage of hits Michigan has made in the portal the last 4 years has been at a really good clip. And not to mention the retention numbers that Michigan has are huge. And you're really not wanting to recruit over guys that are coming back, like the Rod Moores, who we expect to come back, Rayshawn Benny, TJ Guy, guys across the defensive line are going to be playing huge roles next season. You don't necessarily need to over recruit those guys. And not to mention, you don't need to.
Let's be clear. We thought there was a good chance Rayshawn Benny wasn't coming back. Derek Moore wasn't coming back. You brought up Barham. He's a guy that even until just recently we weren't sure, but going into the portal we were concerned about. I mean, corners, wide receivers. We could go on and on with some of these guys.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the wide receiver talk is what it is. Look, we'll kind of
now we're back.
Yeah, we'll see what the spring portal window brings. Obviously, you gotta maybe guys leave, or they kind of address they just see what they have before they make more moves in the spring. But yeah, look, I mean, you got a big wide receiver in McCulley, and then Simpson is a big play guy when he's healthy and actually playing. So it's wait and see for me. I think from a numbers and depth standpoint, and getting guys that can contribute right away, like Metcalf could play right away at safety.
Keep forgetting about him.
Yeah, so they've made some good additions, but it's easy for me to sit here and say, oh, they've had a great portal window, but you have to let it play out. You have to see what they have. I mean, maybe the floor is kind of seeing what they have in the spring and then going from there. But Michigan's quarterback play is going to be better. It kind of has to be by default, because I don't think it can get any worse than what it was. So, and the offensive line, if there's more, there's continuity there, as if with Sharon Moore possibly putting more emphasis on being around the offensive line a little more, maybe there's a better offensive line play too, which equates to wide receivers having more time to get open and things like that. So at the end of the day, I'm still kind of just waiting to see what these guys look like on the field. I mean, again, it's easy to say that they had a horrible window. It's easy to say they had a fantastic window, but none of it matters until, the ball starts kicking off here many months down the line. So, yeah, we'll just kind of wait and see. I personally, I didn't have any issues with what they were doing.
I agree with Josh. I think overall you can say it was a success. I think, a lot of Michigan fans are frustrated with the wide receiver position in particular. And I can understand the frustration. You have a really bad year, and we've talked about it. It was a combination of many things. The wide receivers weren't good. Quarterback play wasn't good. The scheme wasn't good. Kirk Campbell wasn't a good offensive coordinator last year. And all those things combined to put together the product that Michigan had on offense, which was really bad. But you bring in Donovan McCulley at 6'5". He's a good big body guy. Anthony Simpson. Neither of them are really big name guys, but I think this year was a weird year in the portal because there weren't a lot of star players really moving around that much. It was kind of just, a lot of depth guys, rotation guys kind of bouncing around, some big name guys here and there, but I don't think it was anything near the talent level that we've seen in the last few years in the transfer portal. And I just think that's kind of been what's hindered a lot of teams, and Michigan included, at the wide receiver position. But yeah, I think it's been a success. Like I said, they've brought in they've clearly identified holes at many positions that they've needed to address, and they have. They brought in 2 receivers. They bring in a couple of offensive linemen, one of which is probably going to start. I mean, Trevor, you put out a prediction piece, right, for the offensive line a few days back, and it did have the Lawrence Hader. I don't know how to pronounce his name yet.
We're going with Hatter because I want to call him Mad Hatter. So until
Okay.
I'm told otherwise, we're going with Hatter.
Well, Mad Hatter was your projected starting left guard, and obviously the season is still what feels like years away. But Michigan did what I think they were supposed to do. They identified some areas in which they could improve, and they improved. And you can't ask for much more than that. You keep you keep building these guys up and keep developing them and getting better. And I think it'll turn out good in the end. And like Josh said, quarterback play is going to get better. And so I think by default, the receivers are going to get better. I think people forget what Samaj Morgan did as a true freshman with J.J. McCarthy as his quarterback. And there are pieces there. I mean, you look at the wide receiver room, it's very, very deep, but just a lot of these guys are unproven. And so it'll just be about who steps up. And I think it's the same in the secondary too. And Michigan clearly addressed that heavily with the Metcalf brothers and with Caleb Anderson. And I'm forgetting if there was another one or two in there at this point in time, but I think it was a success. I don't think you could have asked for much more than what they did.
The big thing for me with the portal is, I've seen a lot of talk about, we saw a lot of parity in college football this year, right? At least more than we're used to seeing. And that's a good thing. That's what we were hoping. And I've seen NIL credited a lot with the level of parity that we've seen. And I would argue the transfer portal has been more impactful to parity than NIL has. Now, the NIL people are getting in the transfer portal as part of the equation, right? But we haven't seen a change when it comes to high school recruiting yet. Georgia, Ohio State, like the Oregon, right? The same few programs that have been in the top the last few years have continued to be at the top. What's changed is Georgia and Alabama in particular, those are the two I've called out a lot. Not only have they lost starters, impactful level starters, they've lost blue chip recruits, 4- and 5-star kids from this class and the class before, the last 2 classes. A lot of those guys have been jumping in the portal. If they're not playing right away at some of these bigger programs, they bolt. And why Georgia has been so good for so long, and Bama before them, and even Michigan in 23, wasn't just the high-end talent, it was the depth.
Yep.
How many times have we joked in Ohio State, right, in that equation as well? If your 5-star wide receiver busts, okay, so what? I'll go to the next 5-star wide receiver, right? They don't have that level of depth of talent anymore because the transfer portal has spread that out a little bit. And when you look at Michigan's 2023 championship, we talked how much about the guys that came back, right? And the COVID year obviously helped with some bonus years, right? But that team was about a lot of the players coming back, Michigan keeping its best players, rewarding its best players in the NAL. That was kind of the system at that point, was they were going to take care of their own because they didn't really have the resources for just the recruiting, and then adding the pieces they needed in the transfer portal. And that was national championship caliber. The 2 teams playing tonight, which gross, I don't even acknowledge it, and most people are probably be watching this after the fact, but Ohio State. What do we talk about throughout most of the offseason and even into this season? Ohio State replicated Michigan in a lot of ways with this unfinished business and bringing guys back and adding a few big pieces in the transfer portal. Notre Dame has a lot of veteran guys on the team. Now, Brock, to your point, we've got 2 transfer quarterbacks in that national championship. We didn't see anything like those 2 guys in the portal this year. And that's not even including like a Cam Ward and some other guys that were in the portal. So I agree with you. I do think that the talent level came down a little bit. But when you're measuring success or not, I will say On3, their system of ranking the transfer portal, I really appreciate because they include departures. Where did you start and where are you finishing? Right? I had to call somebody out when Tacario Davis, the cornerback from Arizona, committed to Washington. They had said something like, oh, getting a top corner, that must be nice. I had to point out Washington lost 5 corners to the transfer portal. right? So like, okay, cool. Glad you got that. And then Georgia got they got Branch. Yeah, go talk to Georgia fans. They're freaking out that they don't have an edge player right now. Because he went to Missouri, Ohio State, maybe they get him if they're not playing for the Natty. But anyway, I just think the retention piece is so massive.
Yep.
And then you look on defense, the depth they've been able to bring. So Derek Moore coming back is a bigger deal to me than anything. Benny coming back, bigger deal. I still like the potential of a Pierce and Ike Ewan and Enoetta, but you bring in Payne and Williams to, I think, Brock, you pointed this out, fifth-year guys. You're going to have 3 fifth-year guys on the defensive line and potentially on the offensive line as well with Hatter, Crippen, and El Hadi, right? You clearly were looking at a corner, but I think it's become clear that they ideally probably want to keep Zeke outside and not move him back to nickel. Hill's coming back. People were penciling Hill in as gone because he wasn't playing and wearing a different jersey number at the end of the year, right? Now all of a sudden he's back. You're like, oh, okay. You expect Mangum. Brandon Hillman's sticking around to compete. Houseman, Jimmy Rolder sticking around to compete. You brought up Bowles. You still have your own young guys, Cole Sullivan, Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng in the class. And at the edge position, you brought up more Guy, Brandt, Nichols. You had Nate Marshall, Baxter, Edikpe. All these guys are there. And you just need Michigan's talent evaluation to come through. On offense, I get it. You saw what happened last year, and you've made your mind up on wide receiver. But, Josh, I want to hit on wide receiver one more time because I do think had even a Skylar Bell committed, which I think this proves, like, Michigan interested in UConn wide receiver Skylar Bell. Oh, my God, we're looking at a UConn receiver? Really? That's how desperate we are, blah, blah, blah. And then you don't get him, and it's like, oh, we didn't get Skylar Bell. We're ruined. Like that evolution that fans go through. I think getting a guy like him might have made people feel a little better because McCauley's a great ad, but he didn't play last year, right? Yeah. But so much of my frustration last year, how much did I talk about Kendrick Bell getting more snaps than anyone? Peyton O'Leary getting more snaps. Fred Moore, play Fred Moore. He's kind of buried behind Tyler Morris. He goes and looks really, really good in that bowl game. And to Brock's point, Samaj had the best freshman wide receiver season since Mario Manningham. So if McCauley's healthy and Fred Moore can actually get some reps and I have Samaj Morgan and now I'm peppering in the tall freshman that I brought in with Browder and Washington. And Channing Goodwin and Stewart are coming back for a second year. And I still have Kendrick Bell and Peyton O'Leary. And I bring in, is it Simpson? I keep mixing up.
Yeah, Simpson.
Yes, I keep mixing up Simpson and Anderson. That's going to bother me. I'm not going to play 9 wide receivers. I need like 3 or 4 to be good.
Yeah.
I tend to lean towards, I think you both kind of shared this sentiment that like the O-line was bad to start the year. The scheme wasn't there. The QB play wasn't there. Yes, wide receivers weren't perfect, but wide receivers also got open at times and didn't get thrown to, right? I think this group of receivers with the offensive line playing better, with a better play caller, with the scheme being elevated a little bit. And to your point, Josh, the floor is Davis Warren. If Mikey Keene's better than that, you're already upgrading. If Bryce Underwood as a freshman is better than that, widely expected upgrade. And if Bryce Underwood even sniffs the potential we think he has as a freshman, I think you can see wide receiver play just automatically go up because you've got Bryce Underwood throwing him the football.
Yeah, and look, I mean, there's no guarantee that Michigan is going to trot out a bunch of freshmen at wide receiver, but for obvious reasons, they're extremely high on Andrew Marsh, extremely high on Browder. They think
you're right. Thank you.
Yeah, they think that Browder is going to be a good one, and he's got all the physical traits that you want from a big.
I say, Brock, you saw him at the bowl game. That is a big dude.
Yeah,
he's very tall. Jamar Browder is very tall. Yep.
Big dude. So there's options there, and the good thing is you have them on campus right now. They're going to be participating in the spring. Is there a guarantee that any of these guys are going to play week 1? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, we'll have to see how they develop and how things go. But, we also have to recognize that there's another window coming up in the spring too, which means, yes, players could leave and they could bring more players in too if they need to once they evaluate what they have after spring practices. So, if there is an opening for a guy that makes sense as a wide receiver and someone that can fill in on the depth chart where they need it, then yeah, they'll probably go after him. But I think right now with the additions that they've made and McCulley and Simpson, I think they're plenty satisfied with what they have right now and are willing to kind of check it out and see what's going to happen over the next few months. The same thing with the punter situation too. I think they're more than fine, kind of waiting it out to see what they have in the in the spring and address from there. Very much like what they did with kicker last year when they brought in Zavada during the spring window. So, I don't think that just because the winter window is open, they're done completely. And there very well could be more attrition coming up. We don't know that. It's just, this is the nature of college football these days. Attrition can come at any time, at any point, any time. Stuff that we might not necessarily, can predict or not. So there's still a lot of dominoes that still need to fall. And the big one, obviously, is the start of spring practice to kind of evaluate what they have. And, the fans will obviously get to see it during the spring game as well. But look, they have options. At some point, you got to develop them at receiver. And then from there, that's on the staff. That's on Bellamy and the staff at that point to develop them. And if that's not happening, then obviously you gotta reassess what's going on there. But I'm not sitting here and saying Michigan does not have options at receiver. They do. They're young. They got to develop them, but they've got guys that are capable. And in that influx of freshman receivers that they added, it would not be surprising at all if at least one of those guys saw some significant snaps this season.
Steve brings up a good point I just want to throw in real quick, Brock, too, which is Chip Lindsey's scheme. That's still hard for me to not say Chip Kelly. Chip Lindsey's scheme should include not just running backs more, but he's a tight end heavy scheme guy as well. So the tight end for North Carolina last year took 80% of his snaps in the slot. So Marlon Klein, Hanson's pre-scoring, like you got a lot of depth in the tight end room. That's going to be a factor in the equation too.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like Hogan Hansen. I think he's going to be a star. He had a very good bowl game in the ReliaQuest Bowl against Alabama. Really showed out, and obviously Marlon Klein is thought of as one of the most athletic, fastest guys on the team. And hopefully Brady Prescorn will recover well from his injury that he suffered during warmups against Ohio State, which was really, really strange. But Trevor, I like the point you brought up about the receivers and how Michigan has a long list of guys at receiver that could potentially be factors there. They just need a few of them to step up and be really good. I mean, I can think of almost 10 guys right now that Michigan has that going into 2025 could be like a viable option at receiver that could really be productive. And I mean, you got Samaj Morgan, Fred Moore, Peyton O'Leary, Donovan McCulley, Anthony Simpson. Then you got Channing Goodwin and Marion Stewart. And then you got the two incoming freshmen in Martian and Browder. I mean, there's a long list of guys there that can be effective. They just need a few of them to really step up. And like Josh says, to develop and Michigan could have something there. I mean, you get a few of those guys to get a lot better, and obviously quarterback play will improve. I think the offense could be pretty good. And obviously I think the running game will be better too with what's hopefully going to be a better offensive line. You're going to have Justice Haynes at running back with Jordan Marshall and Ben Hall back there as well. So if the running game is better, obviously that'll open up things in the passing game as well too. So I think fans are maybe a little bit quick to rush to the panic button at receiver. So that's my take on it.
I agree, but I agree with you, but I also see their side.
Yeah.
Right after what they saw last year, it's easy to not want to count on a lot of the same guys again. Right. I get that sentiment. I just still don't think, look, if they would have gotten a Deuce Robinson, right? Or like some of these guys that seemed like absolute game changers, then okay. But I think there's still this, especially in the portal, where guys are looking for a lot of guarantees. I mean, we saw some of the stuff out there. Some of the things these kids are asking for, even outside of money and playing time, is just ridiculous, right? But you're still Michigan offering a very crowded room where you're going to be rotated, and you're still selling a vision that hasn't happened yet. As good as everyone thinks Bryce Underwood is going to be, right? And the negative recruiting that still exists, there's still a big prove it factor for Michigan that they have to do this year. And look, again, that doesn't mean they need to become a pass heavy offense all of a sudden, right? We talked about, I remember in the 2023 year, we were like, dude, if they had connected on like 3 or 4 of these deep balls that they weren't, clicking on, what it would have meant for the passing numbers, for JJ's touchdown numbers, etc. Right? So Michigan just has to be more explosive and more efficient in passing. I think they had the efficient part down and thought that would continue, and it didn't. Right? So obviously your top receiver can't have 200 yards, and you're going out trying to pitch some of the best wide receivers out there. And to Josh's point, if you're going to get a guy like Andrew Marks, he's probably got to see the field. Right. And I think he is good enough as a freshman that he could, whether he has a Samaj like role throughout his freshman year, similar to what Samaj had, I don't know. But I think the pieces are there. And that's partly because I do have a lot of faith in a guy like Fred Moore and Morgan, and I think they can just be utilized better. I did want to touch on the offensive line because that's going to link really well to the next piece when we talk about recruiting. I get the concerns people have here as well, because the group wasn't as good as maybe we've been used to, Josh. But your average fan brings up 3 starters are back from an average O-line. I'm assuming plugging in Sprague and Hatter. I don't love it. My first thought is, when you say plugging in Sprague and Hatter, like, that's not a great thing, right? Andrew Sprague is a future stud on this offensive line. He was I don't remember where he finished in recruiting, but one of the top recruits in the class last year. He played late, obviously played against Alabama, looked very good. I think there was a sentiment. Sentiment's not the right word. I think the coaches messed up, plain and simple, with how they handled fall camp and made some personnel decisions last year. And I think that might have impacted the attitude or the mood of this group a little bit as well. I didn't expect Crippen and Halati to be back. I think the fact that they came back, Michigan was obviously looking at centers and stopped, and Crippen came back. I think the fact that they did come back shows there's been an acknowledgement on both sides that, hey, this isn't who we are last year. Like, let's come back and be what we were, right? And I expect big things from Crippen and Heidi coming back 5th year. If Hatter does end up getting it at left guard, getting that job, say what you want. That dude's played 3 years at a championship program at Ferris State. LSU wanted him. Wisconsin wanted him. This wasn't a nobody that Michigan just went out and picked up, right? And the last piece I'll throw in, people have thoughts about Evan Link. And on our boards I've done it, and in articles I've done it as well, and I've tried to show, I agree, he probably shouldn't have started at the beginning of the year, and it was a rough ride, and then Gentry eventually took the job over. Those 6 games after he came back, Evan Link was fantastic. He allowed 5 pressures against Indiana. That he allowed 8 total that whole stretch. So 5 of them came against Indiana. 1 total against Ohio State and Alabama. That includes playing left tackle against Alabama. You take out the Texas game where he allowed 10 or whatever monstrous number it was, his second start of his career, and that Indiana game, Evan Link was pretty good last year. Very comparable to, I think you remember on the board I posted, it was similar numbers to what Jalen Mayfield had in 2019. He had better pass pro numbers than either Ladarius Henderson or Carson Barnhart last year. I think he gets a knock. And I see this too. Link should be a guard. He might move there, but you are ignoring so much of what happened in the back half of the year. The fact that they put him at left tackle against Alabama and he did so well shows I think they have some trust. And not only him, but Sprague as well.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think this year was probably the best thing to ever happen to him in terms of his development. As Harbaugh, this is a Harbaughism, but the time on task is so important for offensive linemen. Well, both sides offensive and defensive linemen. You need to play and like legitimate snaps, not just practice snaps. You need to play legitimate snaps to learn and develop. And he's got a full year on tape now that he can learn, and I expect that to be beneficial for him moving forward. And as Steve mentioned here in the comments, there's been a emphasis on adding reinforcements to the coaching side as well on the offensive line.
Great
adding
point.
analyst Juan Castillo and Sharon, obviously, an offensive line guy, will be more of a presence there. Does that make you feel comfortable about how they feel about Grant Newsome? Maybe, maybe not. We'll kind of have to see how this year goes to really get a good feel about which direction this is going to go. But they've got the pieces. They've got the guys. Do they have to be elite? No, but they can be pretty good, and that's all you really need. I wouldn't necessarily call the 2023 offensive line elite, but they were pretty damn good. That's all you need. Just enough that you can create some space for your backs to operate. And Michigan's got two good backs in Jordan Marshall and Justice Haynes. So look, there I can't just sit here and say, Michigan's offensive line is going to be light years better than what they were last year. They don't necessarily have to be light years better. If there's improvement there, they'll be a pretty good line. Michigan's offensive line wasn't horrible. Was it up to snuff? No, but it was good enough to win you some big games when you needed to win them. So if they can have that kind of performance in the big games and translate that to a whole year-round type of thing, then you're in a much better place than you were last year. So the reinforcements are there, from a personnel standpoint and a player standpoint. So Sharon's kind of got this figured out now. He's kind of figured out what he needs to do to be a good head coach. I'm sure at multiple points during fall camp, his head was kind of spinning a little bit as he kind of figures out how to run a program. Now Sean McGee is having a bigger role, and he's been crucial to this success, both in recruiting and in the portal. So, with Sharon's ability to be more proactive with the offensive line, I think by default, you'll see more improvements there as well. So there's no excuse for Michigan's offensive line to not be better this year. That's what long story short, with the attention to the coaching staff, the personnel, and the additions through recruiting, and Babalola and we'll talk about Ty Haywood here shortly. It should be better. There's no excuse to not be better.
I think a part of the offensive line that isn't talked about enough, honestly, is we touched on it a little bit earlier and how old they're going to be, especially on the interior if it looks the way that you predicted, Trevor. And experience is good. Age and everything like that is really good for the offensive line. But another factor is the leadership. And I think that's something Michigan didn't really quite have this past year.
Point.
Was, they were switching centers every other drive early on in the year between Dom Jadis and Greg Crippen. And Giovanni El-Hadi's a first-year starter. Josh Preeb transfers in from Northwestern. And Evan Link is starting as a true sophomore. And I guess they had Miles Hinton over there on the left tackle, but it just seemed like they lacked leadership. And I think that's something that's going to be big for them going into 2025 is you're going to get Crippen and El-Hadi back as fifth-year seniors. These guys are both going to be going into their second year starting on the offensive line. And you bring in a fifth-year guy in Hatter, and the tackles will be young, but these are all guys that have come up in the program, really. And I think that's going to be huge for them, honestly. As for a program like Michigan, with the offensive line being the heartbeat of the program, the lifeblood of the team, it's going to really bode well for them, I think, and it's going to work in their favor with how long some of these guys have been in Michigan.
That's such a good point. And the leadership piece, and kind of building off of how I started, Crippen waited 2 years, the one behind Olu and then the one behind Nugent to get his shot. And I think everyone knew it was going to be Olu's gig when Olu came, right? But when Nugent came, he missed spring with an injury, and Crippen had kind of a job to fight for there. And we heard all the way into fall camp that he was really pushing Nugent. And I think what ended up happening last year was, and this is me kind of a mixture of my opinion and some things I heard, but we know Crippen got hurt for a week, and then they kind of shuffled some things around. And for Dom to win that job over Crippen when he got hurt for like a week in fall camp, I think they just put way too much weight into fall camp.
Mm-hmm.
I really do. And I think that probably affected Crippen. Like, dude, I waited, all this time behind guys, and then like I get hurt for a week and I lose my gig. Like, what? And then they both played on and off. I mean, we talked about it all last year, how bizarre that situation was. And it was kind of a similar thing with Link, right? Link was the backup left tackle, not even really a part of the right tackle conversation. And then they're like, well, they were considering him there too. And Andrew Gentry's got to be like, what? Right. And it is what it is now, right? What happened between Link starting and playing as much as he did, Gentry's eventual injury, and it is where we are, right? Don't get me wrong. If a Olu type player at left tackle is in the portal and Michigan had a shot at him, I'd say go get him. We talked about months ago. Those guys don't end up in the portal. I saw a lot of people, a guy would go in the portal. You knew the name. It was a big name from a big program or a top recruiter. We were like, oh, we got to go get him. And then all of a sudden you go look at PFF or whatever numbers, and you're like, oh, he actually hasn't been playing really well, right? And then we've seen some guys like Pete from, was it New Mexico State? Yes.
Yeah, I think so.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Josh, but I feel like Michigan's stated interest was probably a lot higher in reports than it ever actually was, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's happened a lot too, to kind of shape people's narrative or vision of this transfer portal for Michigan. Is an agent or whoever is out there saying this guy is interested in Michigan, Michigan's interested in this guy, and then they never even visit and they go somewhere else, and it's like, oh, I can't believe we didn't get that guy. It's like, oh, how mutual was the interest really? Right. Michigan added.
It also helps too when you got Kentucky overpaying for guys like that. I mean, like that $1 million, that's ridiculous.
And people got to realize too, this isn't like the NFL where guys have contracts and they deal with whatever they've got, right? You overpay for an outside guy. We talked about continuity of culture till our heads exploded back for when Sharon Moore got hired all the way through now. That's what destroys the culture. Mm-hmm. Something Michigan did this offseason is they continue to reward the guys that were here. And players are going to understand a guy like Bryce Underwood getting what he gets because he's worth it. You got to give guys what they're worth. Otherwise, you're creating a trickle-down effect throughout your roster that you're not going to be able to stop in terms of what players think, right? So, they add, like I said, they add Hatter. He's expecting to be the dude at left tackle or left guard, but he knows he's going to have to compete for it. Brady Norton, right?
Yeah.
Top FCS tackle. He could play guard, swing guy. I'm not sure he'll play this year. I think he probably needs to add a little weight, adjust to this level, but he's a factor in there. Backing up Crippen, Jake Garnera had a really strong freshman year for this team that made them comfortable there as well. Nathan Afobe is still a guy that can push as well. And then I'm not even, Luke Hamilton, Ben Roebuck, Connor Jones. There's a lot of names of guys that just haven't played a lot. I think that's probably a big concern too, is like the depth there isn't a lot of experience, right? Last thing I want to talk about, and then we can kind of start to factor in, Andrew Babaloa and Ty Haywood, who was obviously on campus this weekend. Michigan has a chance to add 2 of the top 5 tackles in this class, which is almost unheard of, a year after getting Andrew Sprague and Blake Frazier.
Yeah.
Right. It's an elite group of young talent there. I put what I put out there, Brock, in terms of the depth chart projection, which was Link, Hatter, Crippen, Elhadi, and Sprague. I wonder how much flexibility the staff's going to have this year. We talk about like the best 5 offensive linemen finding spots after versus position battles. I wouldn't be shocked if Link ends up at guard or a Sprague ends up at guard because, this guy looks better at this spot. I think Michigan truly is going to try and find their 5 best guys and then go from there. And does that mean a guy like Afobe could actually win a job? I think it does. I hope there's that level of competition coming in, but to your point too, Brock, finding leadership. But anyway, how do you feel about that, Josh? Like almost like there's so much young talent in this group that, like, not that you don't want to put your best team forward every single year, but like maybe it didn't make a ton of sense to bring in a bunch of dudes to stall all the youth you have when, like, starting next year, your entire offensive line room is going to be nothing but like these top recruits. You've been crushing it in the last 2 cycles.
Yeah, I mean, it's very possible. I mean, obviously, we don't know what goes on in practice and how these guys are developing behind closed doors at Schembechler. So it could very well be a scenario where it's like, hey, we're at a point now where, we don't necessarily have to add experienced guys because we've got some young guys that we're really high on, and we'd like to see them at least give it a shot in spring and see how that kind of springboards from there. But yeah, I mean, I mean, obviously don't know that for sure, but I think that could be a scenario that, that they're at a point where, especially when you recruit well, your chances of hitting on blue chip prospects go way up. So, I mean, there's a good possibility that they have a number of prospects there, on the depth chart. And that's not even just an offensive line either, that they are high on and would like to see them get an opportunity to at least give it a shot and see where they're at. If that means it's spring and kind of reevaluating from there. But yeah, no, it wouldn't shock me one bit to see if that was kind of the mindset, moving forward the next couple of years, if their, retention numbers are still good, you're going to be relying on some younger players to fill in some roles here. And if the hit rate is high, yeah, the need to bring in an experienced guy is really low. I mean, you still can if you need to fill in depth pieces, but if these guys are ready to start and plug and play guys, then the need is so much lower than what it used to be just a few years ago.
Well, to your point too, you're gonna have a situation where there's some top recruit guys we've been really excited about that aren't going to play.
Yeah.
Right. There's only 2 tackle spots, and there's 5 or 6 guys at tackle we're excited about. So,
yep, absolutely.
Yeah, the future is bright, but you're right, Trevor. It's a crowded room, and especially if Michigan picks up another one here in the next couple of days, it's gonna get even more crowded. And so we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But it does seem like, I mean, I'm struggling to think back on recent years, but it seems like at this point in time, the offensive line is more put together than it's been in recent years. I think a lot of in the past, it's been just a lot of unknowns. You kind of knew who was going to be near the top, but I think you obviously did it. You put together a prediction, and I think a lot of people would agree with that at this point in time. And it seems a lot more set in stone than it normally is on January 20th. So, have those guys play. You got, obviously, if it goes that way, you got 3 fifth-year guys, and let the other ones develop. I think you're right. Brady Norton might be a year away. But letting those younger guys develop, getting them in there and ready for 2026. And obviously that competition is going to be fierce because, like we talked about, there are only 5 spots, and Michigan's going to have a lot of talented guys there. So we'll have to wait and see.
The competition piece is so key. We know why this program under Jim Harbaugh, and will continue to like competition under Sharon Moore. Iron sharpens iron, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's good for everybody. But the most important piece of that, I think, is at the end, you have to make the right choice, right? Not only so you're picking the best player to put on the field so you win football games, but players know who the right choice is too.
Yep.
Right. And when you're not doing the right thing by the players, like, they'll lose their job and maybe they'll be frustrated, or they might not win a position battle. But on an individual level and a collective level, guys know who the better players are, right? If you're not playing the better player, though, that can cause a lot of issues throughout your roster, right? And I think that's a big piece of it, is like, whatever you do has to be tangible, and the entire roster's got to see it and believe in it too, right? Josh, let's talk on Haywood real quick. He obviously, we started hearing rumblings before the early signing day that Michigan was a factor there, and then it seemed like a foregone conclusion he was going to flip to Michigan. and then he decided not to sign, but instead pushed the decision back to this later signing day period. So Babalola was obviously in the class on campus, early enrollee. He's not played a lot of football. He's a guy that started late, and even though physically he's there and he has a lot of tools, I think it's rare to see a freshman contribute anyway, but when you're talking about some of this elite 5-star talent, I think between him and Haywood, most people would say Haywood would probably be the guy more likely to push for reps or even potentially a starting job early. I wonder now, though, with him signing late and not joining the team till the summer, if that potentially would hurt any impact there. But anyway, Haywood was on campus this week, finally, after all the rumors, on campus for 3 days. You were already on the fence. You did about putting in a prediction. You did put in a prediction. I know things always go well on visits. We've talked about this 100 times. But as of right now, no more visits for Haywood scheduled. Things are feeling pretty blue when it comes to Ty Haywood.
Yeah, I'm expecting it to be Michigan at this point. It felt that way since November, but it's easy to say that when a kid hasn't visited, but this visit needed to happen in order to kind of at least put a bow on Michigan's side of things. Weird things happen in recruiting all the time, but since this is coming down to a Michigan-Florida State battle, I really like where Michigan sits coming out of the weekend. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me one bit if Michigan tries to get Haywood to commit during the national championship game tonight to kind of create some waves. I'm not saying it will happen or I'm expecting it, but it would not surprise me one bit if that were to happen.
That'd be a beautiful troll move.
Yeah, it'd be fun. It'd be really fun.
Not a troll move. You'd obviously rather be in the national championship.
Right, exactly.
Just a nice way to get talked about. Yeah.
Yeah. So the sense is that a commitment it could be imminent. The next couple of days, weeks ahead. Obviously he's signing in February, so there's not that much longer to go, but at this point it would be a massive upset if it wasn't Michigan at this point. Really just an incredible offensive line class again that Michigan's pulled. It's small but mighty in terms of talent with Babalola and Haywood, and obviously I can't remember his name right now. The center from
Caden Strayhorn.
Yeah, Caden Strayhorn. Thank you. Sorry to the Strayhorns, but not to leave.
Did you say Avery Gatch too?
Oh, Avery Gatch. Yeah, no, Avery Gatch, yeah. It's a really fantastic haul, and I think obviously Babalola and Haywood are going to overshadow both of those guys, but Gatch I think has got the makings to be a really good offensive lineman for Michigan too. So can't forget about him. But at this point, a commitment realistically could come at any point, and then obviously signing in February wraps that up. So. Just great job by Michigan, by the staff and the NIL folks, just getting that done. Really putting a bow on it with so far no drama, so that's good. Anytime you can get a recruitment across the finish line without drama, it's always a good thing.
Yeah, we didn't see any of that in the portal, did we?
Nope.
I don't have much more to add other than Michigan, this is going to be, pretty historic for Michigan here to be able to pull in two. Neither of them, I was just looking at the rankings. It looks like neither of them, Haywood and Babalola, are 5-stars on Rivals. They're close. Haywood's right there. And
my Twitter notifications are well aware of that fact. My God, how many people pointed out to me that it's ridiculous that Haywood's not a 5-star. We don't control the Rivals rankings, folks. Josh had to hear about Shamari Earls for weeks.
I slammed my hand on the table for him to get a 4-star. Arguably should have been a 5th star, but I'm done fighting that, picking that star rankings battle. It's none of my business. I'm just whatever.
When we factor in everybody, I think it's fair to consider him in that 5-star conversation.
Absolutely.
You're potentially looking at two high 4-star tackles and then 3 5-stars in Bryce Underwood, Nate Marshall, and Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng. So just an incredible job. That's 5 top 50 players right there. And so just an excellent job by Sherrone Moore and the staff to be able to bring those guys in, and two of them at tackle is I mean, that's comfortable for Bryce Underwood. If you're a freshman quarterback going in there, obviously they may not play right away, but knowing that you've got those two guys there for at least 3 years is exciting for sure.
Yeah, and it's a good point. I mean, this is a class that, yeah, is kind of historic for Michigan. You get Bryce Underwood, and again, the recruiting rank. I mean, we're higher on Nate Marshall than other sites are, right? And I think Owusu Boateng too. We have him as the number 1 linebacker, and Marshall is number 2 edge, I think now. But however you look at the rankings across the board, you add Haywood, and then we didn't even talk about Michigan's the trending leader for Mathis at edge as well, right? So you're talking about players at quarterback, both tackles, a edge player, a linebacker, a corner, potentially 2 edge players that are arguably top 1, 2, 3 in their class at their position, could end up being the best player at their position in the class. That's an elite group. And yeah, Haywood, it's already a really good class. Haywood puts them at another level. I don't know what it would do to the rankings. I haven't done the math on it yet. But again, just that continuing momentum that Michigan was able to build at the end of the year, huge recruiting class. Now you got to go out, have a really good spring, have a good fall, and put a good season together on the field, right? I mean, that's the next piece. You have to translate the talk into action. And like I said, for now, I believe in Sherrone Moore. Whenever he's identified a problem, he's fixed it quickly. So for now, I'm optimistic. We're hoping that more, we have about 10 minutes. We'll close it out here talking about Wink. We're hoping he's not going to have to make a replacement at defensive coordinator in his second year. What would it be, 5 and 6 for Michigan?
Yeah.
That, and obviously they've been successful across all these transitions. The scheme is largely held. They've stayed in that Ravens tree, if you will. Look, we were critics of Wink. I posted a column on this recently. I think the narrative on this is kind of funny, where it's like he proved all the haters wrong. No, he made a lot of adjustments, and he should be congratulated for that. He did a really good job. But even players have come out and said he made changes, right? But look, Michigan as a collective fan base has gone from, is Michigan willing to pay this guy $5 million to fire him for him to go away, to, oh my God, we can't lose Wink. Right. So
right.
That's the kind of job he did. The Atlanta Falcons and the Indianapolis Colts are the 2 jobs he's interviewed for. Both of those have made decisions. Josh, I know people keep asking you odds, blah, blah, blah. You're not an NFL insider, right? So you don't, right. I think it's always funny when people are like, oh, I think it's 60-40, he stays. Well, you don't know if he's getting offered a job or not. That's what matters, right? As these head coaches start to get hired, some other opportunities might come up. But where are you as far as Wink? Not only the potential for him to go, obviously he's getting NFL interest, and then on the flip side of that, sounds like Sherrone Moore, and I know you're not going to say what it is, but sounds like Sherrone Moore already has a plan in place, so they feel comfortable either way. But they want Wink to stay.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And as we've said on the boards, it's been open communication between Wink and Sherrone through this whole process. Everyone's well aware of what's going on. Sherrone's made it clear that he would like to stay. And to be clear, Wink isn't actively looking for NFL jobs. He's not, begging someone to take him so he can get out of college ball. I mean, he's open to talking to NFL teams that want to talk to him, but he's not actively looking for a new job. He's perfectly happy in Ann Arbor, and one of the top highest paid DCs in college football. So he's doing just fine. But
I'd be shocked if he's highest paid by the end of all this.
Yeah, I mean, it could be a possibility. I mean, his contract due for a renewal here soon. So, yeah, I mean, but look, I mean, we've seen it before with Jim Harbaugh. The NFL pull, when you're an NFL guy, that pull is hard to say no to, or at least hard to not look into to see if there's a path to return. I mean, it's hard to say no to what you love. And let's be honest, Wink is an NFL guy. He's not a college football guy. But however, Michigan is fortunately enough to have him as a defensive coordinator, and turned out to have a pretty good year in that regard. So at this point right now, I mean, what is it? January 20th. I'm expecting him to return to Ann Arbor next year just because the two places where he interviewed for have already filled their vacancies. So
Right.
I wouldn't be surprised if there were other teams that reached out and he interviews. Again, it's not a slam dunk that he gets a job in the NFL this cycle. So I think he's back next year, and not. I think the immediate danger with the Falcons and Colts are out of the way, and obviously once head coaches get hired and they start to assemble staffs and things like that, things might change. But right now, you'd have to assume that Wink will be back, and again, like anything, things can change in a heartbeat. So. He could interview somewhere tomorrow for all we know. So,
yeah,
right now in the here and now,
we've had plenty of pods where.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
The next day, like, damn, really? Okay.
Yeah, no. So the here and now, I mean, they've gotten through the thick of it in terms of the two interviews. We'll just have to see how it goes. I mean, there's no evidence to suggest he's going anywhere right now, and you just kind of have to wait for yet another NFL hiring cycle to come and go.
We thought we were done.
I thought, I was just thinking about it the other day. I'm like, man, it's going to be so nice to go through an NFL hiring cycle without have to worry about what everything's are doing. And then here comes people interviewing Wink. But hey, at least it's not a head coach. So, they can find a DC. And yeah, speaking of, if Wink were to leave, the big if, there is at least one name that I'm aware of that Schroemore has spoken to. I can't mention that name right now because I don't want to make anyone mad at me. So I don't want any angry phone calls. So I'll just kind of leave that alone. But know that there is a plan in place if Wink were to leave. I'm not expecting it to happen, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's funny, Trevor, how you pointed out the discourse completely changed on Wink in like 6 weeks. I mean,
I'm one of those people. I'll be honest.
Hey, I got hate on the stream for defending Wink, and I think I invested my money well into the Wink corner for sure.
Hey,
yeah,
sorry, Brock. The
That's
one
right.
thing I pointed out that just kind of made me laugh about this whole thing, like he made the comment early in the season that, again, was probably to Seth at MGoBlog, but I also kind of took a little personal because I had been doing similar stuff in terms of analyzing the blitz conversation. He made the comment to Angelique about the Ohio State games, like, you going to say I blitzed too much? Like mocking us critics for saying that he was blitzing too much when he literally blitzed significantly less in that game.
Yeah.
Right? Like, no, I'm not going to say that because you did, right? And you were still using exotic looks, but like you didn't have Mason Graham on the edge 14 times, right? There were things that changed. And I've given him credit. The buried outside corner and page to nickel move, if I had known that was a plan ahead of time, I would have said, you're crazy. There's no chance that works. And that's a great example of a guy that has forgotten more about football than I will ever know. And once he spends an entire, season with a team and practices and meetings, he sees things and he knows where guys are going to fit. And that's where the experience pays off. And you can't teach 40 years of experience like Wink has.
Yep.
Yeah. And listen, they gave up 31 points.
Sorry, Steve always nails it. We paid the transition cost on Wink. Now let's get some return on it. That is so fair, dude.
Yeah.
That, we went through the speed bumps of him adjusting to the college game, which was obvious that could happen. And he did it. Props to him for doing it. But you're right. Now, hey, you're comfortable. Give us the second year, bro. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Wink, dude. Wink has a lot of football everything. Football neck vibe. The swagger of that man is another level. Okay, Brock, sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. Well, listen, they gave up 31 points to Texas, and if you remember that game, Texas let up in the second half. Like they completely dumbed down their offense and took it easy on Michigan in the late stages of that game. And then they just kept getting better. And if I remember right, I was doing some research the other day. I think Michigan held 6 of its final 7 opponents to 21 points or fewer, which is very impressive. The only game they gave up more than 21 was against Oregon, if I remember right. And the defense was kind of just mediocre most of the season, most of the early part of the season, mediocre to bad. And then all of a sudden, like the switch flipped in the second half of that Indiana game. I think it was pretty evident that everyone saw that's when things started clicking for Michigan. And then all of a sudden, the Michigan defense turned into it looked like the 2023 defense, the way they held Indiana in that second half, and then Northwestern holding them to 6 points, obviously keeping Ohio State to 10, and then Alabama at 13. I mean, it was unbelievable what they were doing. And in the matter of weeks, people's opinions on Wink completely changed. And so getting him back for another year would be huge. But obviously, like you guys said, the NFL it has a big pull, and especially for Wink being an older guy, I don't think recruiting is really at the top of his list of things that he'd like to be doing. I could be wrong on that, but he's just an older guy, and he's been in the NFL or he was in the NFL for at least 20 years before coming to Michigan, right? So we'll have to wait and see what happens if he gets an offer, if he doesn't. But I think based on the last 4, 5, 6 games, he proved that he can be Michigan's next good defensive coordinator.
Yeah, and I think, in the same way, Moore now gets a year away from just having to prove he's kind of like Harbaugh and gets to be more of himself this year. Wink gets to do that too, right? Like Wink had to talk about the scheme and him being the OG and blah, blah, blah for a lot of this first part of the year. He can kind of do more of his own thing now. He's earned that right. And there's a comfortability with that, right? Look, he's happy here. I know he likes Ann Arbor, and if you're, being in the college world maybe wasn't his ultimate goal, but he's happy with Michigan. I think it would take the right NFL opportunity to leave. I don't think it's like Harbaugh where it had to be like the perfect opportunity, right? Like what the right opportunity looks like for Wink might be a little bit more open. They're going to have to pay him. That's a big piece of it. Some NFL teams can be cheap with their coordinators. On the recruiting piece, look, I think Michigan has a good formula right now. I think the coordinators, both, I almost call them Kelly, Lindsey and Wink, can really focus on being coaches. And when players come, we've heard Wink is awesome. Mm-hmm. Recruits love talking football. Because of course they do. The guy's been around football 50 years, right? So he's good at bringing on X and O's and talking to kids. Is he going to be knocking on doors and going into living rooms? Probably not. But hey, we've seen what Lamar Morgan can do on the recruiting trail. We've seen what Lou Esposito can do. Brian Jean-Marie got Owusu Boateng. Bellamy on both sides of the ball has been able to help. So if your position coaches are doing the job in recruiting, and let's be honest, the best recruiter on this team is still Sherrod Moore. And if he knows his coordinators are holding down the fort, he can focus on that. He's a little different than Harbaugh in that aspect in terms of the CEO role. Mm-hmm. Moore's going to be a lot more hands-on recruiting than Harbaugh was, and we knew that was the big change. And frankly, in this new era that we're in, maybe the timing would have worked out in that respect. So, all right, we just hit an hour, and I know the game's already started. Some folks are commenting on it. Brock, I already know Josh's answer because him and I were talking about this. Are you going to watch the national title game? No. Yeah.
There we go.
No, I have
no interest, man.
No.
Maybe that's petty, but good God, like Michigan, congratulations. You finally win your natty 15-0, but the next year we're going to make you watch Ohio State and Notre Dame. What?
Hey, well, Michigan still beat Ohio State this year, so it doesn't even matter at this point. I don't even care.
Yeah, I do think that is a funny thing that, like, Ohio State fans, Michigan's so upset, blah, blah, blah. Would I rather Ohio State not win a national championship? Of course.
Mm-hmm.
Does you winning it this year take anything away from what Michigan did last year? No. Do I think it's funny you're going to win after losing to Michigan? Yes.
Yeah.
I love that tip in the cap. And again, I don't want to get into the issues with college football playoff, but you can take nothing away from Ohio State if they win this playoff, beating Tennessee, Oregon. Why can't I remember who they just played? Oh my God. Texas and Notre Dame. That's an incredible run.
Yeah.
Right. You can't take anything away from them. You got to realize you're still the most Mickey Mouse title yet that you got in only because there was 12 teams without beating your rival, without playing for a conference championship. Like, in totality, like, yeah, this run you went on at the end, you absolutely deserve credit for it. But man, it's just kind of ugh. And you were the favorite at the beginning of the year. You were supposed to win it all, so you could make an argument. That's where the playoff does work out, right? Where if the best team drops a game they shouldn't, they still get a chance to prove they're the best team in a tournament format. I mean, that's more of an NFL kind of thing, and that's where we're heading. So it is what it is.
Yeah. They dropped 2 games they shouldn't have.
Yeah.
Not
Well,
just one. So
were they favored over Oregon?
I don't know, but they should have been disqualified from the playoff for losing to Michigan in the way they did.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, we've talked about this already, that the format was designed for a Power 5 that doesn't exist anymore and blah, blah, blah. They got to figure out a way. You wanted the conference championships to matter, and the exact opposite happened.
Yeah.
The ACC and the Big 12 are not going to agree to a change next year. They'd be stupid to do that, right? Mm-hmm. But that change is coming. You're not going to see the auto buys for the conference champs anymore. And I'm not going to be shocked if the SEC and Big 10 demand like 4 teams each every year. So I don't know what they're going to do, but we'll see. I think the round of 8 should be playoff games at home too. I think they should not be bowl games. I think that's one thing you can do, because then Oregon would have had a home game instead of playing in the Rose Bowl, for instance. But
yeah.
Anyway, I don't want to talk about that too much. So, all right. Josh, good to have you back, man. Good to see you.
Really?
Brock, nice job as always. Those watching, thank you. I appreciate the folks also not protesting, but choosing not to watch this disgusting national championship game. Although some of you have been. I can see your comments, so that's fine. We'll be talking about the Ty Haywood stuff. I'm sure that's going to probably, some more stuff will trickle out in the next day or two over at michigan.rivals.com. We've got some feedback on some other recruits that are on campus for 26 and 27, including the current leader for best name in the 2026 class, Bear McCorder. Give me a guy in the offensive line named Bear, please. It's awesome. Yeah. We have recruiting notes over there. Obviously, Brock, we didn't get to basketball, but Brock has been at all the basketball games, and that's starting to pick up. I mean, Michigan is a legitimate Big Ten championship contending team in year 1 under Dusty May. Pretty impressive stuff. Michigan hockey starting to pick up. Just had rivalries with Ohio State and Michigan State. We can start thinking about Frozen 4 soon. Ooh. I don't know what that noise was that came out of me, but there you go. We will try to be as consistent as we can. Hail to the podcast live Sundays at 7 is always the goal. Keep track on Twitter. We always update as we go. And then, of course, make sure you're liking, subscribing, and getting notifications so you can catch Dennis live during the week as well. He's had incredible content on football recruiting, the portal, and a lot of stuff on basketball as well. Can't say enough about how lucky we are to have Dennis. And yes, absolutely. Props to Brock for his basketball coverage. He's rewarded with a team that's a little bit more entertaining to watch this year after the grueling season he had last year.
Thank goodness.
How about that OT period, huh?
That must have set a record for the longest overtime
35 minutes
ever played in the history of basketball. It was unbelievable.
They got to do something. The reviewing every single thing. It's got to stop.
And Trevor, I know what annoys you most is that they go throughout the whole game without reviewing anything, and then once it gets to the last 2 minutes, they just all of a sudden, think that every call is like the biggest call ever made, and they review every little thing, and it's unbelievable. But Dusty May said yesterday that he'd be fine if some of the calls were wrong, if it meant just keeping the game moving. Just keep the flow of the game moving. If you miss a call, you get one wrong, no one likes to see that, but no one likes to see 10 reviews in a minute either. I mean, there were legitimately like half a dozen reviews in the last 30 seconds of that game yesterday. It was
I don't remember how many points Northwestern scored in the overtime period, but none of them were for field goals. They were all from the free throw line.
Yeah.
And then I just review was supposed to correct the egregious calls, the ones that were so obvious to everyone and cost a game. And that kind of frames this myth that the last 2 minutes are more important than the first 38, right? And then, you're right. It does drive me nuts. We've talked about when a defender tips the ball out of bounds and you're watching frame by frame to figure out if it's still on his fingernail. That just goes against everything, man. Like that's not, it's always out on the defender. He's the one that pushed it out.
Mhm.
You could do that on every play, right? And we don't want the refs to be the story of the game. You absolutely are, right? I love what Dusty May said, because there's blown calls throughout the game.
Yep.
I mean, let's be honest, the big refs have been terrible. And then now I got to watch them replay every single thing and then give Golden the technical for that elbow. What?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't, man. All right. Anyway, I didn't want to talk about basketball, but yeah, so annoying. The halftime between the Rams and the Eagles started before Michigan's overtime, and they were back on the field playing before the Michigan overtime was done.
Huh.
An entire NFL halftime for a 5-minute OT. But anyway, all right. You know the drill. Like, subscribe, notification bell, and then head over to michigan.rivals.com. Become a subscriber if you aren't already. Use promo code BLUE30. Get the first month free. Give us a shot. Other than that, we will see you next time. Hail to the podcast.